Galimera, galispera, galinichta. No matter where in this wild, wacky, and sometimes wonderful world you might be, thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. It's another London derby coming up for the Gunners. 3 coming up in the next few weeks, and we have a very special guest here to give us the opposition view on the game and the Premier League in general. Let's rock and roll, squaddies. Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad. Welcome back. I know there's a lot of football on tonight, so many of you will be listening and enjoying this show on replay and our audio platform as well. You can check out the show on Apple Podcasts. But joining me is a goalkeeping icon and one of the kindest men in the beautiful game, Mr. Shaka Hislop, ESPNFC analyst. Now, welcome back to Squad Central.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Always good to see you.
Good to see you too. It has been quite a season so far. You know, before we get stuck into the game and some bits and bobs, last time you were here, we talked a little bit about, you know, playing the game, and we've got some new listeners as well now. You played for great clubs like West Ham, of course. We'll be talking about that, and Newcastle. You played against probably our best side we've ever seen. Just wanted you to give the squaddies a little bit of a flavour. What it was like then in that time, in that Premier League era, to be playing against this particular Arsenal team. I didn't mean to put this one up of you on your knees there, Shaka.
That's how I found myself usually against that Arsenal team. So it's totally understandable. I'll tell one quick story to put things in perfect context as to how good that Arsenal team were. I remember playing for Portsmouth against Arsenal. It was the second half of the season. I think it was in the FA Cup at Fratton Park. We lost 5-0, and the Pompey faithful clapped that Arsenal team off the park because it was easily the best performance they'd seen in front of their eyes. And that kind of told its own story, put exactly how good that team was in perspective, that even when you found yourself on the wrong side of an embarrassment, all you could do is applaud.
It's you know, it's kind of crazy when you look back at that time and that Arsenal team, and it just shows you as well. It's a Champions League night tonight, of course, but how difficult it was for us to even get back to a final. How difficult football is, and you know, one of the things that people say now is that physically, I think the game was tougher back then, but endurance-wise, the amount of games you have to play, having worn the shirt and played the game, Shaka, what's your take on, you know, the amount of games players are playing? We've seen a hamstring injury to Kai Havertz surgery, Saka surgery, Martinelli, not just our team, Tottenham depleted, your former club Newcastle last season totally depleted. Kevin always used to say, I don't bite Soph, no one can be tied, this is football, you're a footballer, you've got to play. Where do you stand on that?
I'll say this. I think while the game certainly has changed a lot over the years in terms of the physicality, and when I say physicality, certainly the kind of physical beating that players took at the hands of other players. You know, you're allowed to kick other players back then, quite simply. Pitches were a lot heavier. You know, they weren't as immaculate as you see them today, and that also you know was far more testing in terms of endurance and the impacts on the muscles. So while the game has moved in the right direction in many regards, and I certainly believe the game continues to move forward. I was not a fan of you know, players kicking each other. I was not a fan of somehow you've just kind of, you know, the heavy pitches that you saw back then. I think it lends. I think the technology and the advancements lend themselves to a better game of football now. But at the same time, and even, you know, with the amount of money in the game, etc., it's still 11 humans out there, and there's still a limit to how much you can perform at the highest level. before it begins taking its toll. And paying players a higher wage does not change
Mm.
that toll threshold. I feel there's just far too many games of football in the calendar now. And while I understand the sentiment that you don't get tired, you just go out there and do it, or you figure out a way around it. That can only get you so far. We, as I say, we're 11 human beings, and there is a limit to that threshold. I want to see Arsenal's and everybody else's best players at their best. I don't want to see who copes with being tired the best.
Mm. Yeah. No, it's definitely become a little bit too much, and I think fans feel for the players.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, especially when we're seeing so many more injuries over the last couple of seasons. All right, let's.
Absolutely. And added to that, I'll also advocate for pay them less. I have no problem with players getting paid less to play less football, but to play at a more consistently high level.
Shaka, a comment one of our guests made from a prominent Arsenal podcast last week, Elliot from Arsenal Vision, he was even talking about how there's so many games that even as a fan, how much do you get excited about now? Like tonight's game, right? Man City, Real Madrid. This is a game to get excited about, right? Do you feel the same way because you're still a fan of football as well?
Yeah, I mean, so many games, and obviously as a fan, and as a fan of one club, and you're focused on one club almost exclusively, you understand, and I mean, you kind of see that in the tiered pricing, etc. That's existed for quite some time. But from my perspective, where I'm being asked to keep across the entire league and a number of different leagues, there are games that I really don't want to see, and I mean this really with the greatest respect. There's just there's just football that at times you don't want to, and even as I'm paid to now kind of keep across those games on my days off, because when I'm on, I have to be across so much. When I have a day off, again, I guess today's a perfect example. When I have a day off, I just stay away from it. I stay away from the football unless there's a Manchester City Real Madrid.
Yeah.
So I totally understand. I totally understand that perspective, and I think it goes not just to fans of individual clubs, but football fans, because ultimately, while we wear certain colors and shout for certain teams and shout at others, we're football fans.
Yeah, agree with that. Okay, so big game coming up. Of course, Aston Villa play Liverpool tonight, and that we could find, Arsenal could find themselves 10 points behind. For a lot of people, the title race is over. Before we get stuck into that a little bit towards the end of the show, I wanted to get your take on adversity. You've been in teams, throughout your career where you lose your best players. Some people say Arsenal only have themselves to blame. If I remember correctly, I think you called the Sterling thing potentially not working at Arsenal, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Leicester City, really not physical enough, just don't have the same talent. They're not the same team they were in the Premier League, Shaka. When you're facing West Ham as weak and as wounded as they are right now, it's still a London derby. If you're going into this match and you were Mikel Arteta, are you continuing to roll the Merino dice? Are you giving Sterling another chance? What are you doing in this match?
I'd roll the Merino dice, to use your phrasing, Sophie. And listen, I don't think Mikel Merino is the long-term solution, but given what you saw against Leicester City, I think he's the only viable option. And all you could do is throw people in that position as an audition, so to speak, and see if they get the part, and until they lose it. And unfortunately, because of Arsenal's injury issues, that's just the position that you're in. Now, I think a longer-term solution, I've been saying for some time, is Nwaneri playing through the middle. I think he's an outstanding footballer. I'd give that a shot, but you can't move him to the middle until Bukayo Saka is back, and I know he's carded to be back sometime between the middle and end of next month. So we'll see how that comes. So you just got to make do with what you have. Marino's not an out and out centre forward. He won't play with his back to goal. He won't hold the ball up and link others into the game. But he can play a little bit deeper. So maybe it becomes a slightly more flat front three, a false number nine, so to speak. But right now, all you're doing is asking people to step up, and see if they live up to it. Raheem Sterling, and I'm with you entirely. I think incredible footballer. What a career to speak about on so many levels. I have the utmost respect for Raheem Sterling on so many levels, on and off the park. But right now, when it comes to us all, I think it's gone beyond him, beyond him to play a full 90 minutes or to lead the attack. Maybe he comes on and uses his pace and is an impact player later on, but then you saw kind of his own struggles with the confidence in that pace and how many times he got caught offside. That's something that Raheem Sterling should not be doing. Not against a Leicester City. I feel that stems from his own self-doubts around who he is and what he's able to do right now. So for me, Sterling is an impact player at best, but not one to lead your line.
Yeah. You know, the offsides in the first half were, I said on the show on Monday, I felt so bad for him. I really did. I could feel, especially when you know that, you know, he was such a great player. As a teammate, take us into the mind of a player. It wasn't just, you know, 2 or 3 times, talking four or 5 times this happened. Shaka, do your teammates get angry with you? Is that something that becomes a conversation in the dressing room?
I don't think it spills out into the dressing room. I'm sure something is said on the park, and we kind of understand that on the park, a lot is said in the heat of the moment. Nobody takes it personally. You know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on at any moment. Adrenaline is pumping, emotions are high, and things are said, and that if it was said in a dressing room or on the training ground, players would take exception too. But during the course of a game, that's part and parcel. That's how our discourse goes. I feel something would have been said then. On the other side, to that coin, I also think that Raheem Sterling kind of walks away from that, maybe recognizes some of the mistakes that he made, and how we can address that. And they would go over the tape and realize that, you know, take a half a yard, take a half a step backwards, and you're onside, and a lot of those players develop more wholeheartedly. And to that point, this isn't just about Raheem Sterling or a player on the decline. Again, because I follow so much of the game, I can't help but also think to Real Madrid, Barcelona. I think they should have been back in October. Kylian Mbappe got caught offside. I think it was like 8 or 9 times in a game that they lost handsomely to Barcelona. That had he taken half a step backwards, and arguably currently one of the best players on the planet, made exactly those same mistakes, and he is probably quicker than Raheem Sterling at Raheem's absolute best. So it all comes about, you know, just kind of making those slight adjustments, understanding what's around you, your team around you, and getting better from it. So, you know, while yeah, we can be critical, and I'll be fair, we absolutely have been. As a player, you understand that sometimes it's a little bit of a process, even as an experienced player as Raheem Sterling, even when you're as talented and regarded as one of the best on the planet, like Kylian Mbappe.
Yeah. And with Mbappe, I think, as Brantel's here, one of our listeners was asking you if you think it's a mental issue because of the booing at Chelsea. Chelsea, I think it broke him inside. When you see Kylian, because you know he has the talent, that was definitely a confidence issue getting into his head. Wearing the Real Madrid shirt is a totally different proposition, isn't it, than PSG? So on a final note on Sterling there, have his legs gone, or do you think it's up here?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think your legs start to go. And listen, I've been there. I've been there when, you know, you feel like your superpowers are on the decline and you're trying to make adjustments for that. And what do you do? And then it becomes a mental issue because you're trying to adjust to do things that your body simply can't, that for your entire life you took for granted. And now all of a sudden, you're having to think through this a little bit more, and you're almost having to play a different game as a result. So you're trying to adjust your game in a body that's on the decline. And this is not unique to Raheem Sterling. Every single football player goes through it. And that, so to the short answer to your question is, it's a little bit of the two kind of clashing.
You mentioned one of these players when you were talking about how you can see Arsenal potentially setting up against West Ham, especially if Marino kind of plays that number 9 role. I love the outsider-insider perspective. If there's one thing I think you guys have all agreed on ESPNFC is just how special these two young players are. Shaka, talk to me as an ex-player. You're in goal, you're part of this team, and you see these two coming through from the academy. We talk a lot at Arsenal about how good our academy players are, and I think we've built a lot of them up to be, Bukayo Saka, and we've seen that hasn't happened with Maitland-Niles and Reece Nelson and Emile Smith-Rowe. But these two seem to be cut from the Saka cloth. What are you guys talking about when it comes to Nwaneri and Lewis Skelly?
I think talent in the long term for both of them, and I think the kind of cautious approach is making sure that they both recognize their talent, how far they can go in the game, some of the indescribables that or things that happen behind the scenes that have to be a part of their own daily routines to recognize their full potential. I will also say, understanding that they have to keep their feet on the ground and learn from the players around them, and that's where players like Raheem Sterling, etc., can be of the greatest value to this football club, that those players understand what's asked of them. I will also say that as players, certainly players who've kind of come through and made it and established decent careers for themselves, as I kind of put myself in that bracket, if you allow me to inflate my own ego a little bit, Sophie. We've also seen wherever we go, we see these incredibly talented young players at academy level who seem to have the world at their feet and just need to make that one step further to really break into the first team, to really establish themselves. And for whatever reason, it just goes awry. And it could be any number of issues on or off the park. At the same time, I've been fortunate enough to see the likes of Rio Ferdinand come through at West Ham, Frank Lampard, Joe Cole, so many others come through and recognize the little things that they did differently from the other very talented players in the same academy setup. So Michael Carrick come through, Jermaine Defoe come through. So you understand how fragile or how thin the margins are between making it and not. Even making it after you get a few first team games in under your belt, and then pushing on. That for me is kind of is where those two are, because nobody questions their talent. But a lot of times to make it and establish yourself fully and on the long term, it takes a lot more than talent. I heard, I'm going to butcher this somehow. I was listening to Steve Harvey, a comedian here in the US. This is many years ago, talk about success. And he's like, success, to put things in success in perspective, it's like asking somebody to do as many push-ups as they physically can. And when they do that and they're about to collapse, now you tell them, okay, you've just broken through. Now you've got to hold it. And when your body is totally exhausted, asking you to hold that position, that's what it is. I think that's where you're seeing. I think that's where you're seeing both these players, that they are at that point where they've done the 1,000 push-ups, where they're physically exhausted and can't go any further. Now can you hold it? And all those players on the park around them have done exactly that. Maybe they haven't been as talented, but they've been able to hold it. And now they have to be the examples to the young players, because as I say, it's a very fragile existence. It's a very thin line between making it and not.
Yeah, and a couple of our listeners, including Imran and Demsek, were talking about longevity, right? You look at Sterling, he started very young, competitively very young, burned out by the time he's 30. And now with more games than ever being played, I also feel like these two have emerged so well, and with injuries, now we're asking them to be the heroes, especially one area up front. You're asking a 17-year-old to be your hero for the rest of the season. How do you avoid burnout and also manage instant gratification with the need for games, fans? Not that Mikel cares about how he chooses his team when it comes to fans, but the entertainment factor, you still have to put bums on seats. How do you manage that?
That's a tough question, and one that I find difficult to explain or contextualize in today's game, because I also think there's a lot more demands on these young players that we had back in our day, from social media and what's expected commercially of these young players. That adds to the pressures that they have to endure. Short answer is manage the things that you can't. Or manage the things that you can in terms of social media, commercial appearances, and focus on what's in front of you in terms of your commitments to the game, to the club, your match schedule. Make sure those things are the priority, because there's so much now outside and around the game that otherwise kind of distracts and takes up your energies, that you have just got to do as best you can in terms of managing that. While we can look at the burnout of a number of players in today's game, we can also look at players like Lionel Messi, and I know I'm talking about some of the best players on the planet here. Lionel Messi, who continues to play at he's what, 38, 39. Cristiano Ronaldo, albeit out in Saudi Arabia now, but knocking on 40. He played into his high 30s at a very high level, as did Zlatan Ibrahimovic, as did Teddy Sheringham. There are so many examples of players who played to a very high level deep into their 30s, knocking onto their 40s. So there's also been those examples of players who've managed the things that they can as best they can, and then kind of been able to make sure that the game and the club commitments are primary.
Okay, so excuse me. It would be remiss of me not to talk about this player when I have you here. I wanted to dive in a little bit, because all season we've been talking a lot about how Arsenal don't have a forward, that we've not invested in the last 5 years. Have we really replaced Aubameyang? All of these, comments, and it seems a shame that our forward line is depleted when you look at just how incredible our back line is. Wondered what your take was on David Raya, his kind of evolution at Arsenal, and whether you think he's underrated or rated just right.
It's interesting you say what my take was, because what my take was and what my take now is two totally different things. I question the need for David Raya. I question the signing. I really do like Aaron Ramsdale. I thought he was an outstanding goalkeeper and a good servant to Arsenal Football Club. I didn't think there was a need for another keeper. I thought David Raya's first season was underwhelming. I was not convinced at all. I thought this season he's grown into that position wonderfully well. And granted, he's got an incredible back four in front of him, but I think he's been simply outstanding in everything that he's done. My criticisms around him last season were some of his distribution, which I think he dwelled a little bit too long on. Some of his in some I felt he was deficient in dealing with high balls. I think you've seen a total contrast to that this season in every single regard, and he's been simply outstanding. I take my hat off to him, because he certainly proved me wrong. So while to your question, Sophie, yes, Arsenal still have the issues up front. David Raya is one that Mikel Arteta certainly got right this time around. He's been very, very good indeed.
Yeah, I ate some major humble pie on that one. We'll leave it. We'll leave it at that.
You and me
I want
both.
I wanted to talk to you about the relationship between the goalkeeper and the back line.
Yeah.
You know, we find that some goalkeepers are super vocal, others not. David Raya, the one thing I think that I liked about him immediately was his confidence. He wasn't afraid to put players in their places. You know, when you look at our back line, Benjamin White now coming back from injury, I feel like we have one of the best options at the back in all of Europe. The relationship between him and he's mostly been able to play with the same players. But can you talk to me as a goalkeeper when you have a pairing like Saliba and Gabriel in front of you, what that looks like in a game, what that means to a goalkeeper?
Well, for both in Gabriel Saliba, the most important relationship is the one between each other, understanding each other where they are. As a goalkeeper behind those two, understanding or recognizing that how talented they both are, recognizing their own relationship and understanding of each other. You then have to be the eyes at the back of each of their heads. That if one kind of uh, is out of position or steps in a way that you feel the other might not be expecting, you have to be able to recognize and correct that. So you have to not only build your own relationship with them, but you also have to have an understanding of their relationship with each other. Who likes to cover? What that cover looks like in terms of distance, in terms of position, and then you have to be an out valve. You have to take up a position that if they find themselves in trouble and can't rely on the other to bail them out, what can you do to support? Whether it's playing as a sweeper keeper and coming out behind to cover, whether it's dropping off to get a back pass. There's so many different roles that you can play, and understanding your position in that. And it's interesting. You talk about goalkeepers being super vocal or not. Some aren't. Some are. Some aren't. I think generally there's this kind of, certainly when you coach kids, there's this kind of insistence that young goalkeepers have to talk and have to shout and have to be vocal all the time. My own experience, and I was not super vocal. um, you don't have to be, but when I shout, I am shouting.
Mm,
You understand in the tone of my voice or the context of what I'm saying exactly what's happening, because I mightn't be able to say, Gabriel, there's a man over your right shoulder who's 10 yards away and he's 5 yards away from Saliba. Well, I mightn't be able to give context, but just in what I say, and more to the point, how I say it, he understands. So there's that relationship that you now have to be, a part of. And forgive me if I'm a little bit arrogant, and certainly in terms of the keepers union and the role that we play. So you now have to build, as a keeper, you have to build relationships with your two center halves, with your entire back four, but at the same time understand each of their relationships in a way that they don't have to do, back to you.
Shaka, we've seen there's, I would say the trend in modern day football is possession based. A lot of our forwards, I think, maybe, they've played a lot, what they're asked to do off the ball as well as on the ball. But this kind of era of playing out the back, you see some teams have mastered it. You see some teams really struggle with it. Seen some teams make some real howlers this season as well. What's your take on the style of how Mikel plays the possession-based? I wouldn't call it obsession. It's the way he wants to play the game. What it means for the goalkeeper, everything having to start with, that position. How do you see that in the game today? Would you have enjoyed playing
Oh,
more
no.
this?
Well, that's the easy part of this question. That's the no, I would not. Absolutely not. Listen, I'll be honest. I don't get the insistence on playing on from the back. Um, I think, and I feel that Manchester City got this so well in the early Guardiola and, more to the point, Edison days. Um,
Mm,
because and you know, whether you want to credit Guardiola as starting this trend or not, that's entirely up to you. I will say, I will say, it worked so well because of Edison's passing range. And at times, I feel City have got themselves in trouble because Edison has insisted in starting the ball short as opposed to long. So let me see. So Edison had this ability to drill a ball 60 yards, which meant that as a team, as a back four, you couldn't press very high up. You had to be prepared to turn and chase into that space and behind if he decided to go long. So because you can't press as high up the park, it leaves far more space in that half. So if you started short, you can play through that early pressure because there's just so much more room. Um, but with the insistence of playing out from the back, of playing short every single time, teams can then take the luxury of not bothering with that ball over the top because it's not coming. Or it's coming once in a blue moon. So you can press high up the park, you can really compact it, and you can force those errors. You can force those errors out of the team trying to build out to the back. So then um, which is why you see teams getting themselves in as much trouble. If you aren't willing to go long, if you don't have or that striker who's going to run in behind, or a goalkeeper who can put it over the top of a very high back four, then I think you find yourself playing in less and less space and prone to more and more errors or giving the ball away, or coughing it up to that pressure, and so it's not as effective. So at times I just don't. I understand passing out to the back. I don't understand the reluctance to stretch the game every now and then just to keep the pressing team a little bit honest.
Do you think that Mikel has a adaptation as a manager in game from what you've seen?
Um, I think what he does is, and you can't question the success of it. Is you start with a very solid back four, and that's a blueprint for any kind of successful team, that you have to be good defensively, and then and build from there. And you see that, and whether they're able to adapt less effectively given the injuries.
Mm.
But you know what you're getting from Arsenal. If you are going to beat Arsenal, this version of Arsenal, you're going to have to be very good in your attacking third. It's not going to be easy to find a way past that back four and that goalkeeper. And know that they always pose a threat. There was a greater threat from set pieces earlier in the season. I felt Arsenal had a lot more success, and teams are starting to kind of understand that, and are able to cope with it. The threat hasn't really gone away, but it's been a little bit less effective, probably, the last 2 or 3 months or so, or something of
Mm.
the sort. But it's still there. But teams have been able to cope better. But what hasn't changed is how good Arsenal are defensively, and that's this kind of standard for any successful team.
Do you see this West Ham team diminish since Moyes leaving? Did they make a mistake firing him, Shaka? And it's a London derby. Yes, West Ham are a little on their knees this season. Nothing's easy. We have great results against them, other than the 2-0 last year at home, which could have been 3-0, but for a David Raya penalty save. What's your take on this game this weekend? Is it a banana skin type of game for Arsenal?
I don't see it, because I'm been less and less convinced with West Ham as the season's gone on. I don't think the team will go down. They certainly three far worse teams than West Ham, but they've struggled. I thought the appointment of Lopetegui was a good one, given his resume. It turned out to be anything but. And then Graham Potter coming in, I think is a step in the right direction, but a step more about kind of solidifying this season, making sure that they don't go down, that they remain competitive and building for next. So while I applaud the appointment of Potter, I feel that again that's one for the longer term, and I'm I'm not going to be putting my mortgage on a West Ham win. I mean, let me put it that way as nicely as I possibly can.
I'll get you out on these 2 or 3 here. You're listening to Shaka Hislop. You can catch him on ESPNFC. If you've got the ESPN app, please do so. He's the one that keeps our good friend Stevie Nicol in check.
I'm not so sure about that.
you got both of the Surly Scots. You got Burley and Nicol. It's just brilliant. So a lot of our listeners get very upset with Stevie's Arsenal comments. So yeah, I mean, you know, but he does come on the show all the time and he takes it. So you got to give him mad respect for that. Real quick, before I get a couple of generic Premier League bits out of you before we let you go. Declan Rice, someone you saw a lot, West Ham, your former club. Do you think he's improved since he's gone to Arsenal?
I do. I absolutely do. And I also think it's a slightly different role for Declan, from not only West Ham to Arsenal, but even to the point of last season to this. So much of Arsenal's play this season, attacking players, has gone through Martin Odegaard, and it's about getting Odegaard the ball in the right positions, for him to be effective, and making sure and covering. So at times he hasn't maybe contributed, certainly in terms of goals in the way that he did last season. But I feel he matures, continues to mature as a player in that defensive midfielder role, and understanding when is needed to go forward. I love Declan Rice as a player. I think he will continue to grow, and is one of those players that or growing into one of those players that you only truly understand his value or recognize his value when he isn't there.
I totally agree with that. Okay, is there still a twist in the title race?
I don't think so. I see Liverpool as going on and winning it, and listen, what's the gap right now? Is it 5 points?
7.
Or is it 8 points?
It's 7 points.
And then we've got this Villa game to come. I think, but at the same time, I don't see 7 points as we stand right now is a very big hurdle to climb. I don't see Liverpool dropping 7 points. I don't think Liverpool have been that great over the course of the last month. You saw the Everton dropping points against Everton, albeit last minute goal. I thought they held on for dear life against Wolves. But 7 points is a lot. And then they play this kind of move forward game against Villa this week because of the Carabao Cup final. If Liverpool win that, albeit they would have played a game more, but all of a sudden the gap is now 10 points. And when you're chasing, you look at the gap. You don't necessarily, you don't necessarily take the games in hand at face value. You see the gap, and that's the issue. You're now thinking we're trying to chase Liverpool. We're trying to close a 10-point gap. Psychologically, that is just really, really tough. And then kind of given Arsenal's current issues without a centre forward, I don't see Arsenal closing that gap.
Yeah. I think that's fair. It's tough with the injuries we have. Right, we'll get you out on this one so we can all go watch the big game. It's funny because I put an image together just to make you and the squaddies laugh, but it was like, is there a twist to someone else winning the Champions League with a photograph of Arsenal? But the one that loaded was Vinicius, of course, who's been there many a time. Who wins the Champions League? And do you see a wild card winner this season?
Absolutely, there can be a wild card winner. I mean, history would say one of the usual suspects goes on to win it, just because that's just kind of how things have played out. But this season, more than any other I can think of, the usual suspects have been anything but themselves. Real Madrid haven't been themselves. Manchester City haven't been themselves. Goodness knows Bayern Munich struggled against Celtic yesterday. They have not been themselves. Barcelona have looked very good in the Champions League, but they have stumbled in La Liga. Liverpool have probably looked the most consistent, but I've already kind of spoken about some of their road inconsistencies over the last month. So there quite possibly is the chance for somebody unprecedented to kind of sneak in. Le- Listen, Joselu didn't do overly well at Newcastle United, and then he goes to Real Madrid and they win the Champions League. Mikel Merino didn't do that well at Newcastle. Fill in the blank as you see fit, Sophie. So you see how I make this? This is all about Newcastle. This is all about Newcastle.
Well, I mean, if Havertz was still fit, I would say we could be a wild card. I think it's a tall order, but you can only dream, can't you? So we'll keep dreaming. They're already asking for you to come back soon, Shaka. It's been amazing. It's been such a great chat. We always give our guests 30 seconds as a closeout. What would you like what would you say to Arsenal fans, given the opportunity? What would your parting kind of, not a pep talk, but what would your parting comments be for us Gooners?
That Arsenal continue to build, move things in the right direction. It's been quite some time since anybody has been able to maintain a sustained challenge. Anybody outside of Manchester City and Liverpool maintained a significant and sustained title push, regardless of who wins it. And Arsenal have been that. And football needs clubs like Arsenal. So while people like me sitting on the outside can be critical, sometimes overly so, we also recognize how much the game needs clubs like Arsenal to keep it as enjoyable, to keep it as beautiful as it is.
You're a beautiful human. Thank you, Shaka. We appreciate you. We're going to let you go. Thanks so much. Enjoy the football, and we'll talk to you soon.
Look forward to it. Speak soon.
All right, mate. Take care. Bye-bye. That is Shaka Hislop. You can follow him at Shaka Hislop. And please go watch his stuff on ESPNFC. Generally, he's the one talking a lot of sense. Stevie Nicol will be back later on in the season. And we've sent an invite to someone else as well. So hopefully we'll have a couple of surprises for you. I wanted to stay on for just a little bit. I know that it's a little quiet tonight because everyone's watching football, getting ready to watch the football. We're going to go do the same. Just wanted to give you some housekeeping bits and bobs. I did a presser yesterday with Emily Fox, Foxy, as everyone calls her, I've come to know, and maybe future Arsenal player Sam Coffey. They did the presser together, but I did talk to Emily about what it means to play for the Arsenal. I asked her a couple of fun questions too about her Netflix and chill and her favorite tunes. And then she talked through she was getting a lot of love and a lot of kudos for the banger against Tottenham in the North London derby at the Emirates. And rightly so, she was getting a lot of kudos for that. And she talks through that a little bit. And of course, her captain was involved in what ensued after. So I'll let you go listen to that. It's in the video section. I also spoke to Emma Hayes a few days ago. So if you've missed that, please go and check it out. Emma Hayes praising the Arsenal. That's how things have changed, people. How things have changed. I'll be covering the She Believes Cup and hopefully getting some more bits and bobs from our Arsenal women players who are involved in the tournament. Hopefully I'll get the opportunity to talk to a few of our Gooner Matildas as well, which I know will make a certain Georgie George from down under really happy as well. I know the Arsenal financial report came out today. I'm lining up a really special guest to talk about that in real terms, what it means for the summer. Of course, we've come out looking like we've got record revenues, but of course, the costs have also gone up as well. So we're going to have an honest discussion about that. So look out for that. It might pop up in the video section as opposed to it being a live show. I will be back in a couple of days and we'll have some more phenomenal guests coming up. I think you're going to enjoy the squad that will be appearing right here on HS Central. All right. In the meantime, thank you to all of you squaddies who have joined this evening. And to those listening on replay, make sure your comments are heard in the YouTube section. And my goodness, Monday Madness show really riled some people up. Go check out those comments and, be part of that conversation if you want. Seems like a few people had their feathers ruffled about Monday's show. So, as you know, we welcome all types of different voices here to be heard. Football's about opinions, and we all love the beautiful game. Keep smiling, keep being positive. And don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. Until next time, check out the community page for the next show. And somehow I have lost my place here and I can't find the button. Maybe that's because the world is telling me to stay here a little bit longer with you guys. I'd love to, but come on Real Madrid and come on Aston Villa. Let's go enjoy the football. Love you guys. Till next time.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Bum, bum. We're really out now. There you go. As many